Welcome back as we continue to talk about the pre-production process, and we are thinking, how are we going to develop an idea for a pilot episode of a sitcom? We've decided that we want to do a sitcom. We like funny, we like humor. That's the kind of guy I am. It's all about the funny. I really enjoy things that make me laugh. I'm a big fan of shows that are written in the mockumentary style as well. Shows, a classic one, of course, is The Office. Big fan of Seinfeld, a show about nothing that really just talks about the humor of everyday life, which is really what some of these other shows have kind of really gone after, is this idea that life is humorous and people are strange, and we can find humor in everything we want to do. So I like those kinds of things. I like Parks and Rec. Some of these shows that are classic shows that are sitcoms but don't really feel like sitcoms. There's no laugh track. That's one thing. As I look through some of the old episodes of Seinfeld, the laugh track kind of gets at me. When I say laugh track, I mean, yes, it might be a studio audience that's laughing, but it just feels just so canned, and I'm not a big fan of that. That's why I like some of these newer styles where it's more kind of realistic without the crowd being there, and post-produced as well. It doesn't feel like it's being produced in a studio, although it certainly would be and should be, frankly. And we'll talk about that as we get more into this video series. So the idea that we've been discussing as a group is this idea that what do we have access to? Now, I teach at Dixie State University in St. George, Utah. I've been teaching here for about 10 years. I enjoy the TV production process. We have a couple of studios at our disposal that we can use to build sets, but we also have a lot of just nice locations that are university style locations. And so as we've discussed this idea and talked about what kind of program could we more easily produce, this idea of a university has come about. So here we are, this is Adobe Illustrator. And we've just kind of been poking around with an idea of a title card. What would our title card look like? Our little logo kind of a thing. You can see as we've developed it, we've got this idea for university, kind of this old school kind of Greek building, a classic idea of what a university would look like. So this gives us kind of an overarching idea of what our show is going to be about and the concept for how it's going to be produced in a documentary or mockumentary style, probably single camera or multi-camera film style shooting. And if you don't know what that means is that although we might be shooting in a studio or on location, we're going to shoot it with a single camera or possibly two cameras. But as we set the scenes and the staging and we get the characters where they need to be, we shoot each scene a multitude of times. Maybe we shoot it 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 times from different angles, get some cutaways from other people who are part of the scene that weren't in the main characters, things like that. So, and we'll talk about this more as the production process goes on, but it's an idea that we're just going to shoot it with a single camera or 2 cameras, probably 2 cameras works better. We're going to light the scenes, make them look perfect, shoot it, and then reset. And that's opposed to a classic style where you have multiple cameras and you cut the cameras kind of live, quote unquote, even though it's live to your recording. This one, it's all about post-production. You're going to be editing that footage after the fact. And that's the style that we're looking for. So this idea of university gives us some access to things that might be funny in a university. And as we brainstorm something like this, we might find that there are things that are aspects of a university that are funny. Anyone who's been to college, if you've been to college, you probably have experienced some things that are funny. You've got old school professors who have been there a long time, been teaching a long time. In my day, it was they'd have a notebook filled with old papers that they've been using for 30 years. The same notes just flipped back and forth as they teach the classes the same way over and over again. They like things done a certain way. They don't like change, that kind of a thing. And then you have the newer people who like technology, who don't want to do things the same old way. They want to change things. They want to do things differently. And this could lead to some conflict, which could also lead to some humor as well. Another thing we might find is that it's always nice to have like a comic foil. A comic foil is someone who kind of always is a little bit quirky and strange. We'll find as we develop our characters through this pre-production process that it's good to have characters who have different quirks, different kind of weird things or strange elements of their personalities that allow them to be funny because of those quirks and personalities. You almost get to a point where you recognize how they're going to respond. For example, of course, I'll go to The Office. You have a character called Michael Scott, and you know that he's going to kind of do things in a lazy sort of way, a roundabout sort of way, maybe a little bit not so smart. But in the end, he does kind of still get things done. He still is able to have things be successful. So these character quirks and traits about Michael Scott are things that make him successful at being a character that we like, we enjoy, we identify with even a little bit, because we're all a little bit dumb and we all hope that things will work out. So we might look at some of these characters that might be around. Now we're going to talk about these character sketches that I'm going to show you here in just a second in a future video. But this is going to give us an idea of who these characters are. So maybe we have the old school. And some of this, as we've developed these characters, we've thought maybe there would be a little bit of a play on words. We may work with this in the future as we continue through the pre-production process. But Kilroy, of course, becomes a play on words of Killjoy, and we've talked about this. We'll discuss this character sketch in the future. But if we look at another character, this one, another play on words that we might be able to develop some quirks, an idea that in a college setting, there are always kind of older people, old established people, and there's also younger people, young, good-looking men and good-looking women. And it kind of seems like there might be some interesting conflict between maybe a little bit of tension, some sexual tension, even between these different age groups. You know, people who are got these kind of forbidden things going on. And this might be something that might happen. We've thought about maybe this guy Theodore Bundy, and this idea that maybe he has the namesake of a serial killer, but he even kind of acts like that guy unintentionally, of course, and that might be a source of some humor. We've also talked about, as we've discussed this, and when I say we, this is a group that we're developing this, and I just want to kind of bring you through this process as we've kind of refined these ideas, rather than completely showing you all of the brainstorming and other things that go with it. I want to show you some of the summary of what we've come up with, so you don't have to sit there and think about or watch even all of the kind of useless time that's spent in brainstorming. And when I say useless, I mean it's hard to watch. It's good to do the brainstorming sessions, but it's hard to watch on YouTube. Certainly, to watch these sorts of videos on YouTube or other video settings, you go nuts just watching people talk. So these are kind of the results of what we've come up with. This Dave Brooks, he's an old college student in terms of, you know, he's been there a long time, but he's not old in terms of, you know, senior citizen or middle-aged or something. He's just old in terms of being a college student. 27 is a pretty old college student, especially if he's been going there for 7 years. Then we have George Thomas. He's kind of an idiot. He's sloppy. And he, you know, no one really knows how he was able to even be there. And this might be kind of the bumbling idiot, the comic foil here. This might be something where, you know, we could almost see maybe a little bit of physical humor involved with this. Physical humor meaning slapstick kind of stuff. He falls down, he gets into trouble, he gets into accidents a lot, accident prone. And we can see that a lot of times there'll be a character like this. For example, in Seinfeld, Kramer was kind of the one with physical comedy. He was the one that was always kind of falling down and getting into trouble physically. And finally, we have Dr. Albert Strutnik, and this comes from an idea that I think a lot of people who've gone to college would recognize, that there's a lot of diversity in a college campus, and there should be a lot of diversity in a college campus. But what that means is a lot of times you'll have people who may have accents or have different ways of thinking, different social skills, different cultural aspects, things like that, that we might be able to I'm going to use the word exploit, and of course I don't mean exploit as in make fun of, but certainly there are situations that we all get into because of cultural changes or differences or other sorts of differences, and those are the things that cause conflict and also can also be funny. So we have Dr. Albert Strutnik, who is in that situation. So that's kind of our characters for our university sitcom pilot. We're going to talk in the next episode about how to develop these character sketches, which I've started to kind of show you. We're going to get a little bit more detailed in terms of those character sketches and how they'll work to help us develop these characters and their attributes so that we know how they're going to respond in certain situations. Then we'll start writing a script as time goes on. Do let me know if you have questions in the comments. I'd be happy to answer. Thanks.